Hi everybody, it's Mr. Gray here. Thank you for a fantastic second week of school. It was very hot this week. The kids didn't get to really play outside as much as we wanted, so I'm sure they'll be excited to have a normal temperature of a week next week, and they'll get to go outside and play at lunchtime. I have a few announcements for you. The first one is that back to school night is Thursday, September 3rd from 5:30 to 6:15 p.m. right here in my classroom. This one is parents only, so I look forward to seeing you there. Of course, we have a lot to talk about the year. You got a little invitation in the students' Thursday folder that came home yesterday, and that's something, again, you'll get a Thursday folder irregularly. It won't be every week. We won't always have enough papers to go home, but sometimes it'll be after 1 week, sometimes it'll after 2, or sometimes even 3. It will not be regular, but you will be getting it every so often, at least probably a couple times a month. And so in the Thursday folder this week is an invitation for back to school night. Please come, again, 5:30 to 6:15. The next day on Friday, September 4th is early dismissal. That's a 105 dismissal. And then there is no school on Monday, September 7th. So we have a short week that week. The other big announcement is that picture day will be Friday, October 9th. And then right into our academics for next week. In reading, we have been doing a very short unit. We're reading a book. I'm reading a book to the kids, and then they're taking some notes on practicing how to interpret and write down their ideas for this book, and then they're doing the same thing in their own book. And so they'll kind of finish that up. This was just a way to establish some routines and some guidelines for some of the work that we'll be doing. And so they'll finish that up next week, and they'll make a reader's notebook page, which is just a creative and visual way to display their thinking for the book they have been reading. So they'll kind of finish that up throughout the week. Next week, I'm reading out loud the book The Wild Robot by Peter Brown. In writing, the kids are going to publish their first story. This story has a little bit of a twist, which is that while they started writing, they didn't know that their story had to include this random item. So every kid has a different item. There's a button and a couch and speakers and bananas and all sorts of random things. And they didn't know that they had to include that, but now that they're writing their story, that has to play something of a role in their story. So it's a fun way to make it a little bit different and challenging. And so they're going to finish up their story. We're going to specifically try to add some really small details that bring characters to life, the way they move, talk, sound, the way they interact with other people. And hopefully that's an element that will show up in their final piece of writing. Hopefully that writing is finished when you come to open house on Thursday. Hopefully their writing will already be up on the wall to display, and so you can check that out. In math next week, we have been doing a classroom data project this week. The kids had to make a question and survey their classmates, and then they're making a final polished display of that data, a graph that displays the data. So they'll finish that. We're also going to work on cracking some math codes with a thing called cryptorhythms, and then we'll be looking at specific patterns using the number 4. And so you'll hear more about that later in the week, but we'll be focused on the number 4 for a little bit. In social studies, we'll start pulling apart the first big question we have. There are a few questions that I'll ask throughout the year about social studies, and they're big overarching questions that will cover a lot of ground. So we'll do lots of things over time, but this is the question that's going to guide us for a little bit. And the question is, how does geography shape encounters between people? And that will take us from Native Americans before Columbus in the United States all the way to the early colonial settlements. That will be the overarching question. We have a lot to talk about in between those, but that's what will guide us for a little bit of time here. In science, they're going to go to Science Lab in Mrs. Ireland. Our Science Lab times are Tuesday morning and Thursday afternoon. And then we'll also look at some science in our classroom, which is all about matter. And so they'll read and find some evidence about materials and what kind of matter they're made of, and if the matter is made of particles, and then also like the size of those particles, how tiny they are. And then in language, we'll keep doing Greek and Latin roots. The kids will keep adding to their word collection journal that they're putting together each day. And then they'll also take their first Greek and Latin roots quiz either on Thursday or Friday, depending on how the week goes. We start library next week. Library will always be on Thursday, so keep that in mind for returning books later. PE will be on Thursday, which means if you have more PE focused clothing or footwear especially, that's a great time to wear that, is Thursday. And then the other thing we've been doing is we've been doing some geography activities and some launch activities. We do the launch is a short activity we do every morning, and if you haven't asked your kids about that yet, if they haven't told you about it, go ahead and ask them. There's always something, those are just small activities in geography as well to get the day going. So it's interesting if you want to ask them about geography and launch. That's all I have for you this week. I hope everyone stays cool over the weekend. We'll have a normal week of weather next week. Hopefully I will see you on Thursday night at back to school night at 5:30. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.